Hi BookTube, it's Amy. When I heard that there was a new Michael Crummey novel coming out this summer, I, of course, went out to buy it yesterday. And that is The Innocents, and it's got this really beautiful dust jacket on it. And I almost wish that I had read an article that I discovered after reading it this morning in the Calgary Herald, which has the headline, "I didn't want to write this book." And that, I think, is referring to the subject matter. I would say that for the first about 2/3 of the book, I really enjoyed it. I liked the writing style, I liked the direction it was going. And then it took a turn that I did not expect. I don't necessarily think this book needed to go there, but as I find out by reading this article in the Calgary Herald, Michael Crummey's idea for this book came from an historical snippet, and so he did decide to go there. So according to this article, Michael Crummey was reading in the Newfoundland archives and he found a little snippet from a clergyman in the 18th century who in Newfoundland had come across a brother and sister in a very remote, isolated area, living alone. They had been orphaned as children and the sister was pregnant. And so that is the direction that this novel takes. I did not really expect to be reading a novel about incest. As I said, I enjoyed the first 2/3 of the novel, and then the final third of the novel went there. So I'm not really sure how I feel about the novel. I mean, I enjoyed it until we got to that point, and I realized that this was a story about a brother and a sister who, because they're left alone together, end up having sex several times. And a couple of those sexually intimate moments are described in this book. So as I said, I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not the kind of person who thinks that things should be censored, but on the other hand, I'm not sure why Michael Crummey felt the need to tell this story, to make a brother and sister in an incestuous relationship the main focus of a novel. So the story itself is actually pretty good. It is set in 18th century Newfoundland, and we first meet Ada, who is the sister, when she is 9, and Everett, the brother, when he is 11. And they are living alone in this remote area with their parents. They have a younger sister, a baby, Margaret, who dies at the opening of the novel. And throughout the novel, it is Ada who has this notion that Margaret is watching over them. There's this line that their mother told them about Margaret, how Margaret died innocent and went to sit at the right hand of God, where she watches over them. Of course, as Ada grows, she learns to realize that this is all, just a fantasy on her part. But as a young girl, this really comforts her. So Margaret has died at the opening of the novel, and then their mother dies. And because winter is coming on and the ground is frozen, they can't bury their mother out back in the graveyard plot they've set out, where a sailor and where baby Margaret are buried. And so there's this chilling, sad scene where the father rows the mother's body out to sea and drops her naked into the ocean. He takes the dress off his wife, knowing that his daughter, as she grows, is going to need that dress, going to need those clothes. And then at this point, their father is very sick as well, and he dies not long after. And I thought I would read for you this passage between pages 2 and 3, where Ada and Everett are left alone with their father's body, and they're coming to terms with the fact that he has indeed died. So Michael Crummey writes, "Their father died in his bed before the new year. Without speaking of it, they acted as if he was only asleep, and they left him lying there for the better part of a week, hoping he might wake up coughing in the middle of the night, complaining about the cold or asking for a drink of water. During the day they dawdled about in the store and spent as much time outside as they could stand, cleaving and stacking wood or hauling buckets of water from the brook, picking along the land wash for gull feathers and mussel shells, and wish rocks to add to Ada's collection. Inside they tended the fireplace and drank their bare-leg tea, and spoke in whispers so as not to disturb the man. On the 5th night of the vigil, Ada woke from a dream of her parents. They were standing back on, holding hands and looking at her over their shoulders. Her mother was naked and soaking wet, her hair streaming water. "What is it you're bawling over, sister?" Everett asked. "He can't stay," she whispered. "Don't be talking foolishness. He can't stay there like that, brother." And he set to bawling with her then, and the two helpless youngsters holding on to one another in the pitch. Before it was properly light, he pulled back the one ragged blanket and hauled his father's body to the floor. The heels smacked like mallets against the frozen ground. His sister moved to pick up her father's legs, but Everett wouldn't allow it. The man of the house suddenly. "You sit there," he said, "until I gets back." He gripped the shoulders of his father's shirt. He expected it to feel like hauling a seine of fish, but there was a rigidness to the corpse that made it surprisingly easy to drag through the doorway. Only once on the way down to the water was he forced to stop to catch his breath and shake the numbness from his hands. He rowed out to the deeps beyond the shoal grounds, as close to the same spot as he could guess, judging by the distance from the shore. Their parents might be together down there, was his thought, or within sight of one another at least, though he knew nothing about the ocean's surface. Though he knew nothing below the ocean's surface, sat still for long. He tried to strip off the man's clothes for practical reasons, but his father's eyes were half open, and he lost his nerve from meddling. Before pushing off the beach, he gathered a length of old netting and enough stones to keep the body under, and he tied that improvised anchor around his father's waist. The day was still and cold, the ocean flat and calm. He did not want to watch once the body slapped into the water and the rocks were hefted over the gunwale to take it down, but he couldn't make himself look away from that descent until long after his father had passed out of sight and into the black. So that really sets the tone for this whole novel. This is not a novel you want to read if you're looking to feel uplifted. It is just depressing the whole way through. It is a story of survival. It is a coming-of-age story. But every moment of this novel really is a struggle to survive, a struggle to have enough to eat, a struggle with nature, with moments like finding a bear when they're out picking berries, and also a struggle with just the harshness of life, of the outside world that crashes into their cove. There are a few moments when they find the remains of shipwrecked ships, when they find human bodies. There is one moment when they stumble across an absolutely horrific scene where there are many bodies, and you don't realize until another man comes along who can read and who can decipher this journal that Everett found, what exactly had happened at this ship. So it's quite horrific in that sense. But, I mean, I did enjoy it in a way because we did have some of what I would call, classic Michael Crummey. We had the tales and the stories that are told that almost seem like myth or legend. For instance, when Everett took their father's body out when he returned, his sister gasped, realizing that Everett, at the age of 11, his hair had gone completely white. We have Ada imagining that baby Margaret is watching over them. We have this story about the death of a sailor who their father pulled out of the sea and the fish had eaten his eyes, and they buried him in their makeshift graveyard. We also have this story about these two fishermen who were brothers and who hired a maid to, come and keep house for them. And then one of them wanted to marry her. They both wanted to marry her. And so she was asked to choose, and she chose one brother. But of course, the brother who wasn't chosen was very jealous. And according to this story, he killed his brother, and the woman was left to marry him. And so we have these almost legends that emerge, and it's difficult to tell from these perspectives, from the perspectives of the children, what is real, what is myth, what is linked to their own reality. Of course, we do have Ada realizing that, baby Margaret really isn't looking over them from heaven. But there are other aspects about stories they've heard that they find difficult to sort out into their own reality. So as I said, quite a bit of an unsettling novel. Not the story I thought I was getting for the first 2/3. And the last third of the novel was quite unsettling. So I guess I'd say, know what you're getting into if you decide to pick up The Innocents. And if you're looking for an uplifting read, don't read this. But, overall I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It would have been a 4-star read for me if it hadn't had that incest aspect in the last third of the novel. Excuse me. Which is not really a subject matter that I was looking to read, and there weren't really any hints, I think, in the first 2/3 of this novel that is where this novel was going. So this is The Innocents, Michael Crummey.